about the contemporary political ideologies in general. He discussed about liberalism, conservatism, socialism, postmodernism, and these are lots of contemporary political philosophies that is shaping the modern world. So, in today's topic, actually, what I am discussing is a response from the Muslim world. How Muslim thinkers, Islamic thinkers, political thinkers, specifically responded to those ideological developments and its influence in the Muslim world. So, modern Islamic political thought in general can be understood as a response to the development of modern political philosophy in the West. So it's a so modern Islamic political thought is collectively revolving around the modern political thought in general. So this is one of the basic fact that we need to know. So before I delve into the key ideas, we need to understand another basic point, another key fundamental point, which is that in the history of Islam, we know for the last, before the modern world, before even 1924, since the beginning of Islam, we Muslims had continuously had a particular political model which we call caliphate. And so is classical Islamic political thought largely shaped within the context of caliphate. So the caliphate and its evolution in the last 1400 years have greatly shaped and influenced the political imaginations of the Muslim communities across the world. But after 1940, after 1924, there was a rupture. The modern states are started to emerge, and the modern state and nation state model and modern state model in general basically means the philosophical and ideologically rooted in modern Western political philosophy. So modern state and nation states are fundamentally grounded in a different epistemological and ontological and also ethical principles compared to what we had in the classical history of Islam. So there was a rupture, there was a fragmentation. So this has created a great confusion and also a tension within the Muslim world, how we can adopt the emerging new world system. Mainly, the rupture happened across four important fault lines. So you can find that confusion and the rupture has dominated through four important fault lines. One is modern state is basically meaning to say that modern states are fundamentally territorially confined. So state should have boundaries in order to be accepted as a state. One of the elements of the state is it should have a territory and a boundary. But in the previous Islamic history, we see that there was no boundary. We generally say House of Islam, Darul Islam. Yeah, there may be different sultanates among them, but still the boundaries were not that much relevant to the Muslim community in terms of conceptualizing and imagining the political thought. But today, after the emergence of modern state, boundaries became very, very serious matter. So that actually questioned many of the classical political theories to the core. The theories such as the laws related to jihad and laws related to international relations of the Muslim states, These classical laws were radically questioned by this territoriality of the modern state. And so again, the modern state is based on popular sovereignty. So the real power, according to the nation state model, is in the hands of the people. But when we read the classical treatise of political science, classical Islamic treatise of political science, we frequently encounter that the sovereignty is with the Sharia, or a main task of the ruler is to protect and implement Islamic law. So the power lies with the Sharia, importantly, but modern context, you see the popular sovereignty and the power lies with the people. This is another fault line that created much of debates when Muslim thinkers trying to adapt to the modern system. The third is citizenship. Earlier classical Islamic political thought mainly was based on ummatic conception. So religion was considered to be primary marker of Muslim communities. But in the modern context, we see the citizenship concept of citizenship emerged, defining a different type of or different approach towards the people within a country. So we have new ideologies coming up like nationalism, and even within the Muslim world, there are different types of nationalism: Egyptian nationalism, Turkish nationalism. So these all nationalisms define the citizenship based on a totally different criteria, secular criteria actually, compared to the ummatic conception that defined the whole community in the classical Islamic political thought. So you see in the classical Islam, there were no any issue when Muslim scholars actually traveled from India to Arabia to Yemen to Turkey in Africa. No visa, nothing. They just went there, learned there for many years, stayed there, married there. No any documentation or approval needed. It's an open world. So because of Muslims being considered as one ummah, this was possible. But now ummatic concerns are there, but there are more than that. There's a legal concerns that you cannot travel to another country, even though it's a Muslim country, without any legal approval. So rather than Muslims, now each Muslim country even treat its citizens particularly as a legal category. They should be born in that country, such and such things. So this also created a much debate how we can adapt to this system. And in the modern state is totally a state-centric system, means the state regulates everything. Each and every corner of your aspects of your life is regulated. You need to record even your birth and your death with the state. But in the pre-modern context, there were many different political systems were existing simultaneously. But we have more than the state. Civil society was more powerful. Ulamas were more powerful. And actually tariqas, Sufi madaris, Sufi groups actually dominated many Muslim areas. And so there were parallelly many political models were existing within the caliphate. Though the caliph was accepted was received as a top post, and people respected them, but within the caliphate there were many other power centers were there. But modern state was totally state-centric. So these are the fault lines that shaped, or at least that divided the classical political order between the classical political order and the modern state. So how Muslim political thinkers were confused, how we can adapt to this new development within Islamic framework. The responses to this confusion, the responses to these debates are being considered as modern Islamic thought. Modern Islamic thought actually born out of those responses. So we are even the responses were evolved periodically, considering the geopolitical, local politics of each country, and also within the nature of Islamic political thought itself. Because of these three factors, even the responses of the Islamic thinkers were also evolved periodically. That's what we are going to discuss in this session. So initial response, so one of the most so I have categorized here 5 responses how Muslim thinkers trying to adapt to the modern context. I named these 5 responses in 5 key terms: theo-democratic response, quasi-theocratic response, Islamic democratic response, post-Islamic democratic response, and the Muslim democracy response. So these are 5 types of responses modern Islamic thinkers have developed in order to make a reconciliation between the Islamic worldview and the modern state system. And the theo-democratic alternative or the response was a very influential response developed by Maulana Abul Ala al-Maududi, a prolific writer and thinker from Pakistan, from the subcontinent. And his response was dominated the Islamic political thought, all in all, from 1940 to 1970. His project and his theorization was pretty much dominant. Actually shaped many political movements across the globe, from west to south to east to north. So almost all the revivalist Islamic political movements, one way or the other, affected by Maulana Maududi's ideas. So what are his key idea and key paradigm that he presented? He said Islam has its own exclusive system of state. So we cannot adapt either liberal state or socialist state or any other secular models of state. Rather, Islam has its own state system. Islam demands Muslims to establish that. That was his key point he made. What are the principles of the Islamic state? He said 3 things. Hakimiyya. We cannot accept popular sovereignty as the basis of Islamic state. Rather, we should give the Hakimiyya, the real sovereign power, to the God. So the God is the center of Islamic state. Everything revolves around God. So how people can communicate with God if he is the center of political project? We need to communicate with the God through Sharia. God has revealed us a Sharia. So Sharia is the mediating factor between the people and the God. So we need to understand the guidance and principles and values, how a political society should be organized through Sharia. So means that this is a very theocratic understanding. You need to say there is no place for people up until now. But he introduces the concept of shura as a regulating factor. Even though the Sharia is the source of legislation in Islamic state, no any class of or segment of people is authorized to implement that. Rather, the Sharia is for all. So what Muslims should do, they should use Shura as a mechanism of democracy to regulate Sharia, to implement Sharia, and to make policies in light of Sharia. So there'll be Shura mechanism, there'll be democratic sense of democracy there, but the democracy is not absolute. Rather, it is regulated by the Sharia and the limits of Sharia. Anyhow, here you can see the Sharia and Hakimiyya dominated the project or the political theory that was developed by Maulana Maududi. We see he by himself named his project as theo-democratic project, meaning to say there is a theocracy, sense of theocracy, and a sense of democracy. It was a fusion of the both. So what is the part of theocracy? Yes, God is there as a key player or key center of power, and his role is there as a key key source of knowledge that shaped the policy making process of the country. But still, people have their own right, people have their own freedom to make policies, but in light of those sources, Islamic revealed sources. So Shura is there, democratic aspect is there, and the theocratic aspect is there. So the main task of the state should be to implement Sharia. So the legitimacy of the government is partly judged by the electoral or appreciation by the people, and also partly by the implementation of Sharia. So to government to be a legitimate, government should adhere, promise that it delivers Sharia to the people. And so a key point in his project is he considered ideological opponents as enemies of the state, like communism or any other party simply cannot exist because it is an ideological state. So any rival ideology which is there cannot involve in politics. Rather, yes, non-Muslims and other people can live, but no any ideologies which can become a counterforce to Islam be allowed to exist within his Islamic state, according to in his Islamic state, meaning the Islamic state as it is conceived by the Maulana Maududi. So there is an friend and enemy notion is there within his concept, which was a critical aspect in his project that we need to take into account. So this theorization actually dominated the Muslim world actually from 1940s to 1970, and so his theory was considered to be an ideal one, shaped many Islamic movements across the world. Then again, the second important transformation happened in 1980 to 1990, which was second major impact upon the Muslim or Islamic political thought was not from the Sunni world, rather from the Iran Shiite world. So who is that? Al-Khomeini, Ayatollah Ruhullah Khomeini. He developed a model, a Shiite version of political thought, which we call Wilayatul Faqih model. In that model, again, as like Maududi, he kept God as the center of political project. So God is the real owner of God has the real ownership of the power. He has the sovereignty over the people. And again, he also accepted the role of Sharia in regulating the public life. But he brought Maududi's third important element in his project is Shura. But in quasi-theocratic project, Ayatollah Khomeini brought jurists. So jurists are as the key because he believed, according to Shia theology, the jurists are the most knowledgeable people of Sharia. So they have the right to be appointed as a key policymakers of the state. So they play a key role in Wilayatul Faqih model. So he even brought democratic mechanism to justify that model. How jurists are elected, not just merely selected. So there is an election for jurists. You have you know that Iran, even the higher council of ulamas were being elected by the top jurist or collect council of jurists in their country. So jurists are there. The third, even before the public, the jurist comes. So God, Sharia, and the jurist are the key three fundamental pillars of this quasi-theocratic project. So the people come after that. So the real power lies with these three institutions, or these three elements: God, Sharia, and the institution of the jurist. Why I call this quasi-theocracy rather than absolute theocracy? Because in an absolute theocracy, jurist generally, in absolute theocracy, what you had in the classical medieval Christianity, the Christian fathers and the church claimed that they get the real power from the God. God has given them the legitimacy to regulate the public. So they didn't get their legitimacy from the people at all. They didn't get the legitimacy from the God. That's the absolute theocracy. But here quasi-theocracy means, since they have the legitimacy, since they are the jurists, they have the knowledgeable people, and they are just representing their Imamiyat tradition, so they have the legitimacy to rule the people. But still, they claim that Imam Ruhullah Khomeini claimed that The jurists didn't get their power from the God, rather they are being elected. So there is a sort of democratic notion is there, though not absolute democracy, but they were being elected. They do not claim that they claim they get their power from directly from the God. So this is why I call this project as a quasi-theocracy rather than an absolute theocracy. In an absolute theocracy, there is no role for election. Rather, the jurists may claim that they get their power directly from the God. That is not the case. That has been not the case in Iranian political system. So this model actually is an Shiite version of Maududi's project. And this has dominated and actually influenced, not actually influenced, I would say, had an effect on the Muslim world from 80s to 90s. And from 1990 onwards, there is a shift from theodemocracy to a new project called Islamic democracy, which was conceptualized, theorized by the famous Islamic political philosopher Rashid al-Ghannouchi, the leader of An-Nahda movement in Tunisia. And interestingly, in post 1990, I have mentioned in the presentation what's happened in 1990. You see, in 1990, the Soviet Union collapsed, so the liberal world was extending, and the liberalism and liberal democracy was started to, it became a movement and influencing many countries to liberalize, to democratize. So this has given this has created a debate and challenge for the many political ideologies that they were more prone towards exclusivist authoritarian tendencies. Those liberal ascendancy and the evolution of liberal democracy after 1990, after the fall of Soviet Union, actually challenged some sort of an exclusive ideology, so push them to move towards more democratization. So within this context, Rashid al-Ghannouchi was thinking about the Islamic political thought. So he wanted to develop he criticized the theo-democratic model and develop an alternative one, which he called by himself Islamic democracy. And so in his project, what are the pillars? Again, he adopted the previous concept. God is the pillar of Islamic democracy. And how we communicate with the God? Through Sharia. He accepted that Sharia is the key source of legislation and key source of policy making in regulating the public affairs in Islamic democracy. But he argued that people, instead of jurists, or instead of Islamic ulamas, people comes next. He argued, interestingly, Sharia is embedded within the Muslim community. So if Muslim community is there, meaning to say they actually live with the Sharia. So Sharia is a lived reality with the Muslim community. So we don't need to Islamize the Muslim community. Rather, Muslim community in itself is carrying the spirit of Sharia. That is a ummatic essence, meaning it goes through ummah's bodies. So he argued. So he accepted democracy within the Muslim world, and he said that we don't need to Islamize. So we don't need to put any external pressure upon the Muslim community. Rather, Muslim community itself is Islamic. Muslim community is Muslim. Muslim community is Muslim, meaning to say they are carrying the spirit of Sharia. So just allowing the democracy to flourish means it automatically will become an Islamic democracy. And democracy within Muslims, they are not secular, so they are they are carrying the Sharia spirit. So when they act, they will act according to the Islamic limitations. So democracy within the Muslim world will be definitely an Islamic democracy, according to Rashid al-Ghannouchi. This is his first important contribution to the debate. The second, he argued that democracy can be contextualized. There are values the liberal democracy trying to promote. There are methods of democracy. He said, yes, we don't agree with all the values of liberal democracy, but we can agree with the models of democracy. So Muslim community can adopt those models and appropriate those tools and mechanisms in light of their in light of their beliefs and values and their worldview. So democracy is not a religion that can compete with Islam. Rather, democracy is just an instrument of to regulate the power. So it can work in any different context, regardless of religion, race, or any geographical differences. Democracy is very neutral set of tools. So that can be appropriated by the Muslims to develop an Islamic democracy. So when Muslims practice it, it become automatically an Islamic democracy. Why? Muslims, they are fundamentally carrying the spirit of Sharia. This is his argument. So he said we need to promote Islamic values rather laws. So in earlier Maududi or other model, Theocracy model, Islamic law discourse was dominating, implementing the law. Maududi also emphasized that Islamic State is the state that implement Islamic law. Islamic State in Shia variant also focused on implementing Islamic law. So Rashid al-Ghanouchi actually challenged that concern. He said we shouldn't promote the concept of law, overemphasize the concept of law in Islamic State. Rather, Islamic State is a state that emphasizes Islamic values, Islamic ethics, Islamic principles, Islamic basic morality is being implemented. So he said that we need to focus more towards values rather than the laws. So these are his key aspects of his debate he developed in post 1990 context. And we see here is Asif Bayat, and he is as an anthropologist. He in post 2011 he analyzed the developments of Islamic democratic thought, and he found out that Islamic democratic thought is becoming a more and more liberalized, towards moving towards more and more liberalized end. He named this trend as post-Islamism, arguing that Islamic political movements are now gradually moving towards a post-Islamist tendency. He wrote about this in his famous book Post-Islamism, The Changing Context and of Islamic Movements, published by Oxford University Press. You can read that. He's an anthropologist from the US. And what was his arguing? He said Islamic movements are increasingly now they have started to reject the Islamic State concept as it was developed by the Maududi, as it was developed by the Khomeini, as a totalitarian ideology. And now Islamic movements are trying to advocate, according to Asif Bayat, in post 2000 context, those Islamic movements are trying to find a reconciliation between the Islamic principles and the Islam democratic governance and the human rights. So now Islamic movements and Islamism increasingly trying to make an alliance with human rights discourses, democratic governance discourses, trying to say that there is no any substantial difference between Islamic value system and democracy and human rights. So there is a more or less there is a fusion of both is emerging out of the recent trends of Islamic movements. This is the observation of the Asif Bayat. He named this trend as post-Islamism. And he says Islamic movements are now increasingly becoming supporters of pluralism and diversity in political settings rather than exclusively presenting the discourse as an ideological project. So now these Islamists are trying to promote value-based understanding of Sharia and Islamic State. So this is, according to Asif Bayat, this is not what Maududi talked about. Now these Islamists, modern Islamists, are moving from that project towards more liberalized version of Islamic State. Why this was happening in post 2000? Because of war on terror and the global war on terror and the impact it had on many countries in the Muslim world and also in the Muslim minority context. So this global dynamics has pushed many Muslim thinkers to argue that Islam is very close to democracy and Islam is almost there in human rights discourses. So he actually categorized this argument, this trend, as post-Islamist. And we have the final version of this debate. Actually, after you see this development after Arab Spring, again Rashid al-Ghannouchi came to the scene and he theorized, he actually critiqued his own concept, his own theory that which he was developed in post 1990s concept, and he critiqued that and rather reformulated it in a different concept called Muslim democracy. What is Muslim democracy? There are a few principles to become a Islamic democracy. You need to accept certain principles that make sure that you shift from Islamic democracy towards Muslim democracy. What are those pillars? One is you should endorse, Rashid al-Ghannouchi said, endorsing democracy unconditionally. We accept democracy as it is. We usually, Maududi and others usually say, yes, we accept democracy, but with limitation. Limitation is what? Limitation is Sharia. Sharia will limit the democracy. But Rashid Ghannouchi said, no, we need to accept Muslim democracy unconditionally. He accepted that. He said democracy in any context will never go against the Sharia, because people who are living in the Muslim world are Muslims, so they wouldn't go against Sharia. So why do we want to be so why do we need to bring the discourse of Sharia into democracy? No use, because there are Muslims, we are Muslims, so we are going to always to respect Sharia. So we should endorse democracy unconditionally. This is his first point that he's made. Second, this is a very key point, accepting the different political ideas and ideologies as a reality. He accepted it. He said he never considered any other secular, nationalist or liberal political ideology as a counterforce to his project. Rather, he said all these different ideologies are there, and we need to accept that as a reality, and we need to work with them to find a common space for the betterment of the country. And so again, the third important point that he made in his very famous piece actually he wrote to the Foreign Affairs, declaring his ideological change, which is Muslim democracy. In that article, he says that he accepts pluralism as a reality, and he actually emphasized accepting the plurality of views more than emphasizing the importance of mentioning Sharia in the constitutional arrangement. So he said that he is ready to keep his silence over the in terms of inserting Sharia in the constitution. Rather, he says we don't need to emphasize that point. We can accept that there are plurality of views with regard to Sharia, and so it is okay that constitution didn't mention anything about Sharia. Rather, it is our commitment, according to him, towards pluralism, diversity, and respect the different views of the citizens. The fourth aspect of Muslim democracy is accepting mainstream discourses of human rights and equality, mainly the liberal conception. He said those conceptions are very close to Islam and Islamic principles such as Maqasid al-Sharia. So as Muslim Democrats, he said that he is ready to accept that. Then what differentiates himself? Does he become liberal? I don't think so. He said still his project is to develop a concept of Islamic concept of state based on Islamic values and based on Islamic ethics. So he still frames his project as an Islamic rooted in Quran and Sunnah, but the interpretation is different. He is more into a different interpretation on those concepts. So this is a kind of a new development with regard to Islamic political thought, the concept of Muslim democracy, that actually as communists have their own project, liberals have their own project, nationalists have their own project, they say the Muslim Democrats have their own project, which is to bring Islamic values into the governance rather than building an Islamic state per se. This is the project of Muslim Democrats. And if any one of you wanted to read this new development of Islamic political thought, I would recommend his own writing that he published in Foreign Affairs, a very famous article before in around 2016 and 17, and the article is still available in online. You can read. So he comparing, he actually critiquing his own ideas previously. Then he said that he is making a shift towards a new concept called Muslim democracy. So the key factors that shaped the modern Islamic political thought for the last 100 years. Now we are in 1924. Actually, the modern Islamic political thought started, emerged after the fall of Caliphate in 1924. We are 100 years now. So for across 100 years, we have seen many developments: theodemocracy, quasi-theocracy, Islamic democracy, post-Islamism, and Muslim democracy. So, how key factors that shaped the modern Islamic political thought? We have five different major schools of thought. Uh, what are the factors that actually contributed to the evolution and the developments of these schools? I have found three key important factors. One is global geopolitics has never before shaped, been a key influential factor shaping the trajectory and the dynamics of Islamic political thought. You see, after the emergence of nation state, Maududi's thought got currency. And you see, after the 1979 Iranian Revolution, then the quasi-theocracy emerged and, impacted on the Muslim world. And the fall of Soviet Union then again contributed to the development of idea of Islamic democracy. The war on terror has again shaped the discourses of post-Islamism. The Arab Spring actually and the dynamics revolved around that Arab Spring, and the global geopolitical responses and the regional responses actually contributed to the emergence of Muslim democratic discourse. So the geopolitics and politics always there shaping the Islamic political thought. The again important another factor is impact of social pluralism. When the Maududi was developing his concept, actually he thought the entire Muslim world would be homogeneous. They believe in God, they believe in certain things. So those fundamental beliefs, he took those fundamental beliefs as took for granted, thinking that Islamic State every Muslim would love those values of Islamic State. So he thought like that there would be no difference of opinion with regard to how to theorize and how to fix the role of Islamic law in the country and policy governance. He thought there will be no such difference of opinions in the Muslim community, given that they believe in fundamental pillars of Islam. But increasingly, Islamic political thinkers came to know that there are more diverse opinions. There were more difference of people, and they are even Muslims, but in certain things they are more rooted on secular understanding, liberal understanding, nationalist understanding. In certain things they are more close to Islam. So you see, here are diverse people, different ideas, different schools of thought. So the Islamic political thinkers increasingly became aware of these differences. So according to those differences, they try to develop and try to reform their own concept, such as the one that you can see that in the life of even Rashid al-Ghannouchi, he supported Islamic democracy. Then after Arab Spring, when he came to Tunisia from UK, the scene was totally different. It's totally different. People were some segment of the Muslims are very secular, some were very liberal, nationalistic, socialistic. So Muslims, though everyone claiming they are Muslims, but here different ideologies are contesting. So he has to face that reality. Those realities, the awareness of social pluralism pushed the Islamic thinkers to further reflect on their idea and develop their initial conceptions. So social pluralism is another key. Awareness of the social pluralism, inter and interreligious dynamics actually shaped Islamic political thought. The third is the evolution of Islamic thought itself. For example, the emerging discourses such as Maqasid al-Sharia, Islamic ethics, and you see comparative Islamic Islamic legal theories. These are the recent developments, or at least for the last 50 years, there were much developments in other Islamic sciences, like in jurisprudence, in maqasid, and all the other sciences were developed. These ideas were also influenced the Islamic political thought immensely. So, I do not believe in single theory fallacy that any particular factor has contributed to this evolution. Rather, taking into account all this combination of factors, geopolitics, awareness of Islamic political parties themselves about their social context, and also the evolution of Islamic thought, together has shaped the modern Islamic political thought for the last 100 years. So this is the current dynamics. This is where we are standing today in Islamic political thought. So we should remain observing how this trend is further improving in the near future. And thank you very much for your attention. There is a one question that I would like to answer, and I conclude my session since it's 1940, already 11:47. Can you make a brief, short briefing between Islamic democracy and Muslim democracy? Yes, Islamic democracy is actually developed by Ghanouchi in 1990. Still believed that establishing an Islamic state is possible. And but in Muslim democracy, Muslim Democrats actually dropped that expectation. They no longer believe that establishing an Islamic state is possible within Muslim world. Rather, they say that what is possible is Muslim democracy, meaning to say Islamic movements or parties can influence the policy making of a country from in light of Islamic values. Rather, that is not the end game, is not to convert it into an Islamic state. Muslim Democrats actually do not try to establish Islamic state. They want state, it's a neutral state, but being as a Muslim Democrats, they are always being shaped, their policies always been shaped by the Islamic primary sources. So they try as much as possible to influence the policies of a country from Islamic value perspectives. So this is the difference. This is the difference. Islamic Democrats, they believe in Islamic State concept. They think that Islamic State can be built, but based on democratic, fundamentals. But Muslim Democrats didn't believe in Islamic State. Rather, they believe a neutral state. But Muslim political movements, Islamic political movements, can participate in that process and contribute to the policy making from the Islamic worldview. This is the key difference. This is the key difference. What actually shaped the difference? Arab Spring.
Thank you so much, Doctor.
Thank you. I think we don't have much time.
Yes.